a signature card, I convert to an autograph card. When you look at that autograph card, it's got all these caveats on it like you're a US citizen, you're subject to backup withholding, you're notified by the IRS that you're subject to backup withholding, you're subject to this, you're subject to that. And it says right on the card, redact what does not apply to you, and mark the box that does apply to you. So, not being a rocket scientist, but understanding who I was at the times, I did these for myself and showed other people how to do it. Is they redacted everything on the back of these signature cards. Okay. So now when you get down to the place where you autograph it on the signature card, you kindly look up and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, but can you tell me what the definition of US person is? Or do you know what the definition of US person is?" Because on the card it says signature of US person, so when you sign that, you basically acknowledge it's a confession of judgment that you're a US person. You're utilizing that banking facility to carry on your commercial enterprises when in fact you can redact everything on there. Open up that interest-bearing or non-interest-bearing account, preferably non-interest-bearing account, and you can write or you can take and redact. Draw a line through it. Redact means to draw a line through it. Draw a line through the word signature. Anybody that knows the word nature and the word, the letter sig, it's the complete opposite of nature. It's the antithesis of nature. So you redact the word signature and you redact the letters US and the word person, and by the way, the US is capitalized as well as the P in person. Underneath the word which says signature you put autograph, and where it says US person you put live man. Then across the bottom of the line, you say all banking transactions with this institution will be by special deposit. All transaction with this bank will be done by special deposit. What you've done now is you've made the record that 1. Your account is not subject to backup withholding. 2. The bank is not a withholding agent for the IRS. 3. You developed a trustee, a beneficiary-trustee relationship with the bank, and then when you get your checks you can deposit the check into the bank, or if you get a check from somebody, you can flip it over on the back and you can say, "On trust special deposit on estate account hashtag," and then endorse it by, and then put executor. Now, what's going on the back of the envelopes, on the back of the white registered mail card, which you have to play with it, you've got a Hewlett-Packard printer, you can do this. I take a piece of paper and I tape the registered mail receipt about 1 and a quarter inch and a half above the left-hand corner of the piece of paper. When I go to print it, I put it in the machine with the face up. In other words, I'm looking at a piece of paper, I can't see anything on it. When it goes through the Hewlett-Packard printer, it'll come out and print on the backside of that piece of paper, where that white receipt is attached. And on that bottom of that second-hand portion of that NCR paper, which is the registered mail, it'll have on the back of it notice of declarative intent or purpose of tender of payment as special deposit. Order from the payer and beneficiary is to be credited to the depositor's account as accord and satisfaction and payment in full and discharge of any and all outstanding liabilities. Page 17 of 61. Now, I have this on the back of an envelope. It's a number 10 envelope. I made sure that I placed it on the back of the envelope, not using a label, but actually printing it on the paper. And I gave it enough room, so when I go to attach or adhere the brown packaging tape that's required on all registered mails, you need to make sure that you understand what you're sealing, that when I put the tape on this envelope it will not interfere with any of the wording that's on here as my notice of declarative intent or purpose of tender of payment as special deposit. Order from the payer and beneficiary. So, that's how I look at this, and then of course we just went over what you put in the official use box of that registered mail receipt, which is a Form PS 3806. And we also went over what was gonna be put on the green form, which is a PS 3811. So, when you understand what you've just done there, you've created a circuit and by condition precedence, by actions that will take place as a result of depositing that registered mail into the United States Postal Service. You're now claiming for the estate the property that's listed and inside that envelope. And it's listed on that registered mail receipt. And it's also identified when you receive it by how you fill out Box D of the green card. Now, one of the things that I was doing this afternoon is I was looking at this guy Dean Clifford, who's up in Winnipeg, and he's brought some very, very good points forward about who they deem you to be when you go into a courtroom, and without invoking a special court of equity, without saying that this office is here by special appearance, without standing over the bar when you enter that belly of the beast, you can make a simple statement, such as I recognize your office as a public servant, sir, and direct your comments to the judge. And that judge now knows that you know who you are because before, the judge and the prosecutor are acting as executors and beneficiaries, and they're making you the trustee. And so, when the executor or the beneficiary tells the sheriff or the bailiff to go ahead and arrest you and throw you in jail, they're going to follow the directions of the executor and the beneficiary because you haven't claimed that status when you entered that courtroom. So, I observed him today on 5 different 15-minute, 14-minute, 38-second video archives that I received a couple weeks ago, but I haven't had a chance to look at them all. There's about 14 of them, but he brings up a very, very interesting point, and we've talked about this on the call last time, that we need to notify them who's going into that room. I'm gonna invoke a special court of equity. This office is here by special appearance. Is this a court of record, or is this a court of chancery? Well, I'm going to switch it right now. I object to any proceedings in this courtroom at law. So now what's gonna happen now? Well, anybody in that courtroom there with dirty hands better have the wherewithal to get up and leave the courtroom, because if they don't, woe unto you lawyers. TJ, when a dealer at a blackjack table stands up to leave the table, what does that dealer do? Thomas claps his hands together, raises them towards the ceiling, sky cameras, to notify, to let the record reflect that he has nothing in his hands. He shows that he has clean hands stepping away from the table. He is abandoning his post for either a break, a shift change, or he's no longer working. TJ, that his hands are clean, and he shows that to everyone at the table as well. Special deposit. A bank deposit that is made for a specific purpose that is kept separately, and that is to be returned to the depositor, which is also known as the grantor, the testator, etc., etc. Now listen to this. Depositary, a person or institution that one leaves valuables with for safe. Page 18 of 61. Keeping. When a depositary is a company, it is often termed a safe deposit company. That's what the post office is, a safe deposit company. And there's no such thing as a depositary bank. I'm not saying depository, rather depository is not being said, it's depositary. Now this references see Deposit 5. Deposit 5 goes to civil law, a contract by which a depositor delivers a thing to a depositary for safekeeping. It's for safekeeping, it's not to be commingled, it's to be kept separate. Thomas, so basically what you're doing by doing this special deposit is you're creating a beneficiary-trustee relationship in a depositary, even though it's called a bank. The action creates the outcome, which the outcome means that all they can do is hold it for safekeeping. Can't commingle it, can't loan it out, can't factor it, can't monetize it, can't securitize it, can't derivative it, can't do anything with it. All it's doing is creating a safe deposit. TJ, now, look at this with the phrase American Depository Receipt. It's not American Depository Receipt, it's American Depository Receipt, and that was brought up to Roger Elvik a while back. And that was brought up to him. We showed him American Depository Receipt, and he repeats it, but he says American Depository Receipt. We said, no, American Depository Receipt, and he immediately says, well, that depository, that's military. Yes, it is. Now, when one looks at this idea and does a bit of research, as we were sharing ideas with this man, as we share ideas with many others, when one does a little bit of research into the post office is housed in members of the Postal Service, conduct the day-to-day operations at the post office, while the Postal Service is a contractor for the military. The post office is under military jurisdiction. That's why the mail always goes through, no matter what. And it is an American Depository Receipt. It's not United States Depository Receipt. It's an American Depository Receipt, and that goes back to nation. You know, nation Pennsylvania, nation Illinois, national, an American national, not a U.S. citizen, but an actual national. Thomas, when you walk into a post office, the bulk mailing room, the 3 times that I've done it, one at the main post office in Los Angeles, which is a huge facility, the clock on the wall is set at military time. When you walk into the lobby area of the post office, it's the normal time. It's the 11 o'clock, the 12 o'clock, it's not the 1,700 or 2,100 hours, and it's the same when you get put into a prison facility. Because all the clocks that you can see, if you ever have a chance to see one, because if you ever notice when you go to jail there are not any clocks around, they don't want you to know that you're operating in military time. So, there is 2 things going on at the post office. One is, it's the private contract carrier for the military, and number 2, it's also the depository for the Republic in a private safe deposit box known as a United States Post Office box at General Post Office. They created a state, within a state, within a state. TJ, and something that other men have discussed, and we've discussed it as well, what is the importance of a receipt? A receipt shows payment. A receipt is title. Look up the definition of the word trust receipt. It is the title. So, put those 3 words together, American, which is the Republic, depository, military, it's a depository that's held in trust, and it's a receipt, it's the title, payment has been made. It's on safekeeping. It falls under equity jurisdiction, however, it appears no claim has ever been made on those, and they're administered at a state level by administrators. And the evidence we've seen is that the administrators have applied for. Page 19 of 61. An EIN for that specific entity. And they do file. If they hold an EIN, then they must file some sort of tax document as the administrator. Now that brings to mind in Black's Law it defines a decedent. I'm trying to think of it, decedent, if I can find it here real quick. A decedent estate with the administrator. Someone else can go ahead and chime in while I look for this. Thomas, here's a thought. If you have somebody, a family member who was in the military, because militaries have post offices. If you were to open up a post office box on a military base and do the executor, establish it as the office, as the estate, for the estate, and now what you've got is you've got 2 different things happening. You've got it on a military base. You have an American depository. You've done it by special deposit, and that post office is now protected by the military. And the Provost Marshal is sitting reins over that area. Provost Marshals have actually jurisdiction over a larger area than just what encompasses a military base. But, see, Provost Marshals can't come in if there's a constitutional conflict or if there's a conflict with the Constitution, because he knows the parties out there aren't competent on the premise to know who they are. I think the office of the Provost Marshal would recognize. The office of the Executor. I think the office of the Provost Marshal would recognize that he has. Jurisdiction over American Depositary, a safe deposit box held on the Republic side, held at a U.S. post office that's based on a U.S. military base. So, there's a little bit of food for thought for people on this call that might have family members in the military. I don't know if anybody's ever researched this stuff, but under the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act of 1940, which comes forth in 98, which has never been repealed or remanded or anything, it talks about all the benefits entitled to someone who's served active military in the United States military service. You're guaranteed 4,000 acres of land and a land patent. Oh, but what do? They get you all interested in going to school and getting your degree, or a VA no money down loan, or going back to school, or getting job placement training, or all these other benefits, when in fact the real benefit, which has been abandoned by anybody in the military because they don't know about it, was getting the 4,000 acres of land and a land patent. That's a low deal title. Free of any taxes. And the reason why I know that is I researched really heavily back in 2000 and 2001, and I did it with a guy by the name of Mike O'Grady down in Lehigh Acres, Florida, who is an absolutely brilliant man, but he's a very particular man to deal with sometimes. So some of you may know Mike O'Grady, very, very smart man, very sweet man, but he's got a very, very short patience. So, another thing that comes to mind too, is that those parties wanting to interface with the so-called civilians out here that need to get an EIN number, they need that EIN number so they can track everything that they do with that widely held fixed investment trust. Actually, it's a fungible agricultural commodity producing a incoherent, widely held fixed investment trust. That's how you interface with all the credit, and the debits, and the benefits, and the services and the privileges that you do with these corporations who, soon as you sign up for them, and they got that SSN number, if you ever wondered why they always have 2-year contracts, it's a minimum 2-year contract. $69.95 for the first 6 months, 2-year contract minimum. So what they've done is they've accessed that trust account for the service and benefit and privilege that they're going to give you, and then they get you to send in the bill the second time. No wonder why these chief financial officers are making this exorbitant amount of Federal Reserve note dollars. They know how to access that side. So, I digress, I've gotten off the point. The basic point we're talking about in this is the American Depositary, and Timothy was looking up something in Black's. Did you find it? Page 20 of 61. But there is always an administrator there, to take up the filing of tax forms, and whatever the public needs to do in an administrative capacity. There's always an administrator there, and they have been administrating it since it was probated, which is most likely within 5 days of the date of birth. Now, Thomas, you brought up a very interesting word, and that is credit. What happens, I noticed this while traveling, stopped off at, let's say, a rest location and picked up a cup of coffee from a vending machine, and the cost was 1 peso or $1, so the dollars inserted into the acceptor register on the machine. Thomas, what does it say on that LCD screen after the dollar's put in? Does it say $1? Thomas, it says 1.00. TJ, credit. It reads credit. 1.00. That $1 was just converted, just like that. It went from $1 to 1.00 in credits. That's how easily this is converted. It was converted just like that. Thomas, that dollar could have represented $350 million, or it could have represented $1. All the machine has is probably about 7 sensor that read it. Now, if you want to put a $5 bill in there, most likely you would have gotten back at least 16 quarters or 4 Susan B. Anthony dollars or those other dollars as your change, because I think those machines will take ones, 5s, and 10s. TJ, and notice how it returns coin as change, isn't that interesting? So, it converts it right back. Thomas, yep, it's floating above the ground. Coins have to hit the ground, dollars can float. That's why they call it floating. And you know, we talked about this a little bit earlier in this country, based upon the formula on Keynesian economics, based upon the labor output. Now, that International Monetary Fund extends special drawing rights to sovereign nations, and they do it as a ploy, they do it to go ahead and rape the freaking countries. As soon as they default, they go and rape all their hard assets, the lumber, the gold, the silver, the emeralds, the rubies, the jewels, the diamonds, whatever, but they get these people to pledge their land first and then the people second. So, the land has definitely got substance, and when they attain these special drawing rights, they now have a way to access that account. So, in my thinking the last 4 or 5 days is when we acknowledge and we say that we're going to go ahead and create this estate. We're going to create this special safe deposit box on the Republic private side, and we're going to do it by special deposit. In the back of my head, there's something telling me that I'm very close to realizing that by the special deposit I now have access to the special drawing rights that are guaranteed every man, woman, and child in this country based upon their bankruptcy that they did in June 1st of 1933 with the National Banking Act. So now, what they did is they brought in this whole mechanicalism, this whole mechanism of stealing the assets of the people by creating all these trusts and having all these barfly attorneys go in and page 21 of 61 represent the trust. Hire an attorney. You might as well put your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye. And they've done it so artfully, and they knew all along, but guess what? All those assets they've taken still belong to the people on this country. They're still a part of this country. It's still the hard assets of this country. And those barfly attorneys who bow down to the freaking crown sitting up in a bench in Canada, or beholden to a judge in his courtrooms in this country over here, have a liability on their shoulders now, don't they? All those assets stolen through their shenanigans and their trickery. I hate to talk about it, but revenge is his, revenge is Yahweh's. But when you start to think about what they've done, especially with the proliferation of family law since the late 70s, I wish I would have kept that article. They projected it was going to generate $7 to $10 million a year, and it's in the $7 to $10 billion range, and it's not only here in this country in America, but it's also in Canada, and these family courts have just destroyed so many families and garnished so many billions upon billions of attorney fees and court fees and everything else. And so they've created a whole brand new business paradigm based upon the Shepherd-Towner Maternity Act, the Indentured Trust Act, and then coming in and taking over the rights of the mother and father to raise their children and convert it into the parents of the kids. So, that's just a little observation. TJ, you know what, Thomas, what you were speaking about just showed me that the three spirits that can receive a certification of vital record, otherwise known as an ADR, they are, when they go in to receive that item, they are transacting a special drawing right. Thomas, they sure are. TJ, they sure are, aren't they? Thomas, they're sitting at the Bank of Mellon, New York in a trust fund account labeled as $23.6 trillion. It's called a depositary. It says it right there. They're holding that at $23.6 trillion, and they've raised their interest rate for people who deposit more than $50 million to 0.00013% from 0.0009%. So that's on account of $50 million or more. So, yeah, what they're doing is they're harvesting the national product, the labor force, as another form of the pledged assets of a country, and they're holding them in trust and doing all the finagling and shenanigans and everything else, and using that as their backbone for their ongoing, I call it the Arthur Anderson School of freaking fuzzy math, but their ongoing financial scheme. TJ, and that's exactly why the trust needs to be expressed, and that fraud be stopped. Thomas, well, the trusts are implied. Most people going into a courtroom, the trust is implied. And they've got everybody into this slave mentality that you've got to listen to what this man in a black robe up on the bank, on that bench, has to say. Well, you know, talk about a paradigm shift, with the realization of the power of standing in a court of equity, invoking a special court of equity, a chancery court, for damages that have been done to somebody by these fictitious entities, and realizing that, you know, this is a global shift. This is not only happening in this country, it's happening in England. I read something in England while England burns. I read a long story about how these people in London, the city of London, installed all these mainframe computers next to the trading floors, and they're siphoning hundreds of millions of dollars. Page 22 of 61. Every day into the New York Stock Exchange and the English Exchange. And so now you've got the government going out and investing all these people for stealing this petty stuff, while these bankers who are sitting in the city of London are stealing hundreds of billions of dollars from the people, and nobody does anything to them. But the disparity is deafening, it's frightful. And Max Kaiser brought it up very eloquently. He said, yeah, you're going to arrest someone for stealing a $99 DVD player, but you're going to let the guy in the city of London rape and pillage all the accounts to the tune of $100 million, or 100 million pounds a day, and do nothing to them? I mean, the disparity is the extremes are getting more and more profound. I do not, by any way, shape, or form, want to tell anybody to go riot. Everybody needs to understand something, like David has mentioned. The reality exists between your ears and your ears only. And your understanding of the scriptures and who your divine creator is will bring you out of their torment. And that's the only way you're going to come out of her belly. Because it says, come out of her. So, until we understand what's between our ears, instead of acting on emotion, instead of logic, acting out of fear instead of critical thinking, we will be doomed to repeat the same thing over and over, which is the definition of insanity. DC, Timothy? TJ, yes? DC, did you speak about the post office, where it is, the church, the door can't be closed? TJ, yes. DC, very good, Thomas. Chuckle. Thomas, of course, the church can never be closed, because someone has to go in and access their safe deposit box. It's always there left for communion. It's always there to go be with your spiritual leader. That's why every post office in this country, unless it's a branch office like in a CVS, has its doors open 24 hours a day, and there's 2 portals there. There's the front door that goes to the post office, which leads to another portal and a threshold that takes you into the public. It's called the USPS. So yeah, if I was to look at that, I'd say that's the root of the Matrix right there. That is the total root of the Matrix. When Neo was standing in the hallway, and he got all those bullets stopped, he realized right then and there that he was the living, breathing soul who didn't need someone to tell him through an earplug what to do. And when he expanded in that hallway as a result of taking a breath, his estate came into full bloom. He was standing in the office of the paramount priority security interest of the executor. TJ, and he can see the code just by looking at it. Thomas, yep. TJ, he could read it, he saw the pattern. There are two places in the will, and the will is scripture, and there are two places in the will that speak of the key to the house of David. One is Isaiah 22 verse 22, the other is Revelations 3:7, and it reads, "And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, These things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of." Page 23 of 61. David, he that openeth, and no man shutteth, and shutteth, and no man openeth. I know thy works. Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. Because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out, and I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him my new name. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Transcriber's note, I copied and pasted Revelations 3:7, 3:13 from the King James Bible, which is similar to what Timothy is reciting in the audio. I did so due to transcription difficulties. I'm not sure which version of the Bible Timothy is reading from. Where is Philadelphia located? Thomas, Philadelphia is located in the United States of America. D.C., Pennsylvania. TJ, where was the first post office? Thomas, Philadelphia. TJ, where was the first bank? Thomas, Philadelphia. TJ, where is Independence Hall? Thomas, Philadelphia. TJ, where was the first Continental Congress? Thomas, Philadelphia. TJ, what is the city called the City of Brotherly Love? Thomas, yes, it was also the first port of recognition of the Republic. TJ, hear and death the lesson. The door that no one can shut. The key to the house of David. Page 25 of C1. Thomas, we're the capacitors, and we allow them to jack us up with their high-frequency crap and test the capacity of our individual mind, body, and spirit and get us to convert, get us to revert, get us to seek people who are not sincere, i.e., the barfly attorneys. So the capacitors need to wake up and say, hey, you're not going to ground me anymore. I'm gonna allow this to pass right through me. Oh, by the way, on the way back, make sure you deposit those funds into my estate account, would ya? Thanks, so much, I love ya, have a good day, we'll do lunch. TJ, charge, discharge, ground, grantor, trustee, beneficiary. Charge, discharge, ground. There must be a ground. Commerce talks about the discharge, the statutes, codes, rules, and regulations states this is for discharge, discharge, discharge. Discharge does nothing place something into the future, it doesn't settle the matter. There must be a ground to settle the matter and complete the circuit. Promissory notes must be grounded, they must return back to the ground from whence they came. Otherwise, it has not been set off, it has not completed the circuit. It appears as such, but it is not a complete circuit. It must be grounded. It must be certified. Grounded. Thomas, by special deposit. We've got to make that special deposit cause we've got to make sure the conductivity in the circuit is properly connected and properly charged, and properly discharged, and the credit properly credited to the account. TJ, it's not grounded, it didn't complete the circuit. If there are electricians on the line, they know exactly what's being spoken about concerning a ground. Host, alright, we've got a guest that has a comment or question, go ahead. From Roanoke, Virginia. Guest, hello folks, is that me? I just wanted to say praise Yah, because what a revelation this has been tonight. Thank you all for coming together for the common cause of man and woman. This is truly amazing because I've always wondered in scripture what exactly key role did Philadelphia play. I've always wondered that, and then when you put it all together like you just did, I think it was Thomas, is that correct? DC, Timothy. Guest, okay, Timothy? Sorry about that, Timothy, yes. When you put that together with the keystone, and the whole 9 yards, that just blew, that just opened my mind wide open. TJ, that's it. Guest, oh, it's amazing, it's just like you said, the Neo, everything you've said, everything tonight has been just truly amazing, it has just opened it up wide open. Thomas. And you couldn't get this kind of excitement even if Barnum and Bailey came into town and you had to pay out one thin dime. You wouldn't get this kind of entertainment and this knowledge nowhere. No Barker could ever bring this forward to you. Oh, sorry, that was my entertainment. Incoherent. Page 26 of 61. Guest, exactly, exactly, I'm speechless. I mean, that's why I was chomping at the bit to talk. And I know I'm in that freedoms chat, and have no clue what I had to press, and thank you James for punching up that asterisk too to let me know that's how I raised my hand there. I asked quite a bit of while ago so that I would be in, you know, in queue, before everybody else did over on the chat and everywhere else. Thomas, thank you very much for your comment, sir. That's very kind of you. Get. I followed through on the magic jack for the other number, but everything that you were saying, Thomas, I think it was Thomas reading about the whole way everything was designed and set up. How they implemented everything, you went off on that big rant? Thomas, yeah. Guest, I just read everything you were talking about, I just read that all today. Everything. I'm talking, I mean, if you guys want to take a few seconds and let me read it, I've got the page opened up. I didn't have it when somebody asked me to post the link. When I saved it I'd already gotten into the 1920s and 30s, but this site that I found today, it's called, you can find what I'm gonna read folks at www.copyrightname.com. Thomas, well, if you've ever had a chance to read any of the material that Phil Kaplan and I put together, the 3,170 pages on the Incoherent, WHFIT on Banatuku M33, we did extensive research on this and we found out that all those things they created, the Emergency Farm Mortgage Act, yada yada, Shepherd-Tanner Maternity Act, the Indentured Trust Act, all that stuff, was all designed to take away our estates from us. It was a preconceived, premeditated step under these people who get on the radio and have control of the media, brainwash all their subjects, and you know, it's just like the first time I heard when FDR talks about a day that will live in infamy, And then, after reading Admiral Kimmel's book about everything that was done prior to and up to the invasion of Pearl Harbor, and I said, this stinks worse than the worst rotten fish you could ever smell in your life. And guess what? The people buy it hook, line, and sinker every time, just like they bought Vietnam, they bought the Korean War, they bought Waco, they bought 9/11. They buy all this crap because they're so pliable in the brains, their brains are programmed. Guest, Oklahoma City, you name it, they buy it, hook, line, and sinker. Oklahoma City, another one. Gulf of Tonkin, another one. The list goes on, and on, and on, and on. Thomas, Ruby, Ridge. Guest. Exactly, it's amazing. You guys are great, you guys are great. I want to let David in on a little secret. David? DC, yep. Guest. This is the man that you blocked yesterday. Page 27 of 61. DC, laughter. Guest, thank you kindly for doing that, sir. Now can you see that I'm not your average ding-a-ling? I've been studying right along with you guys. The only Page 28 of 61. I want to throw something in, an additional point about Philadelphia. Where is the location for the Internal Revenue Service for those entities that do not have a domestic agent? Thomas, Philadelphia. Guest, let me add one other thing, because when I was listening to Dean, I was listening to another one of his videos he did over in the UK with Ben Lowry. The interesting thing is, all three so-called nations, countries, whatever you want to call them, label them with whatever you want, all three have guess what in common? The King's Bench. DC, yep. Guessed, all three of them. Now they didn't understand at first, but they do now. I've been trying to get in touch with Dean myself. But I'm not sure if they realize just how closely related all of these countries are. I don't know if it was David or one of you guys just a minute ago. Thomas, every country that has adopted English law and English rule, Chancery Court exists. That's from Belize to New Zealand, to Australia, to the United States, to Canada, to South Africa. They all recognize a court of chancery. Thomas, thank you, George, it was nice to talk to you. DC, I have unblocked you. Do not blast me with your emails, please. I've really got much more to do than sit here and read your emails. I understand your plight, but you've got to bear your own cross. Host, now we've got Walter in New York. Go ahead, Walter. Guest, hello, can you hear me? DC, no. Guest, alright, I'll take that as a yes. Spilled a bunch of water. Alright, I'm actually using my father's phone. DC, what be you got in the water? What are you drinking there? Guest, oh, a little vodka in the water. This is actually my father's phone. This is Daniel, Jack Flag. Just got a few questions for you guys. DC, no guys here. Page 29 of 61. Guest, men. Chuckle, alright. The first, TJ, welcome Daniel, go ahead. Guest, thank you. The first is the post office box. I can foresee us having some problems with not providing identification setting these up, similar to when we were trying to use executor letters to get the address changes through, or the mailing location changes. DC, well, if they press you for a photo ID or something like that, then give it to them. So long as the box is opened in the name of the estate. But I would like to see people function in that executor office and deal with the situation as the estate and not one of their legal fictions. Guest, yeah, I hear ya. And, where do you see the former address on this form as well, where we would list the Bureau of Vital Statistics? I have an application right here. DC, where do I see what? Guest, you mentioned us using a former address of the estate as the Bureau of Vital Statistics and bringing in a copy of the front page. DC, go on the birth state website, find a Bureau of Vital Statistics, Department of Health, Vital Statistics. They usually have a tab, maybe it's down at the bottom. It says contact us and their mailing and location will come up, print that out. Guest, oh, I meant on the actual post office box form. Where are they asking for the former address? DC, oh, that's on line 4. Guest, unless I'm just totally blind. DC, line 4, section 4. Guest, oh, I see. And we shouldn't put the man address. We should just put the Bureau of Vital Statistics address? TJ, well, aren't they asking that, for the address, to forward all the mail? DC, no. They're looking for a residence, on this state ID, driver's license, so on and so forth. Guest, okay. Now the next thing was, the last call you said you'd cover 2 things, the Dear Taxpayer letter, and what to do with the birth certificates. I'm not sure if you intend on tackling those in this call, or a future one. DC, we don't see any future ones. Page 30 of 61. Guest, alright, let's see what we can do here now. With the Dear Taxpayer, after remolding the SS4 form, I've gotten rid of that, and instead they request Certificate of Death, and I was just wondering when you guys were getting your EINs, and I know they're not necessary, I'm just doing it as a personal challenge. Did they ever request that of you? A Certificate of Death? TJ, I'd like to comment on that. I've had a conversation with a man earlier this morning concerning this. You know, it appears that when the first you see something, or rather are given something, and it's sent off to be processed, there might be a few things that are requested or completed and then it goes right through. And as more men and women learn about it, and they attempt to submit this information, if there are certain things that are incorrect, or if they're being too hasty about it, they'll begin to question and begin to be asked for additional information. And Daniel, that's what it appears is being asked of you. Now, what one suggests to you is this. Read the instructions for the SS4, and it states right on the instructions, which boxes are to be completed for decedent estate. Now, as long as those are completed and that information was submitted, there should be no other information requested from the IRS. So, are you saying that's what occurred? Guest, I've studied that form for quite a while over the past half a year, listened to all the calls, many times. Filled out everything as I truly believe it should be filled out. I responded to them with a conditional acceptance, providing a death certificate, basically cough up the proof that I have to, otherwise give me the freaking EIN, and they just cited an Internal Revenue Manual code right back at me and rejected it. Took about 2 months to get a reply back. So, not entirely sure what's going on. TJ, where was that submitted to? Which location? Guest, Philadelphia location, for foreign EINs. Can't get a 98 EIN from Cincinnati, that's 4. Sure. DC, decedent is not a deceased. Decedent is someone who's dying. We're dying from the moment we're conceived. Guest, that's true. Thomas, and what they're doing is they're saying that based upon some obscure definition and meaning of absentee, that this absentee hasn't shown his face in 7 years, that absentee is considered dead. So, what is the definition of absentee? I'm not in a Black's Law dictionary right now, but absentee means that you haven't had any communication with anybody. So, I think that the best way to overcome that is to start utilizing the office of executor and the estate. Let them know that it hasn't been abandoned and it's not gone, and hasn't flopped into the thin air of Captain Crisco's magic pinky dust. And the only way that you can overcome that is to actually operate and do things, do the acts that are expected of an executor. Stand in that position, and then they'll find out that guess what, the estate isn't abandoned. Asking them to recognize, and saying, I sent in a FOIL request, and I was thinking after a while, I don't need them to respond to my FOIL request. I'm going to go ahead and occupy the office of executor, and if they don't like it, they can take a long walk off a short pier while eating a spicy taco. All I know is that. Page 31 of 61. Substance is over form. The form that they had you fill out is for their make-up world, their Ozland. So, if you're going to allow these little obstacles to deter you in your path, you need to have a little talk with your consciousness and praise to Yahweh to give you guidance, because you can overcome this, just like you can brush your teeth without opening your eyes. This'll become second nature if you're a musician. You know how to play a guitar with your eyes closed, or play the keyboard with your eyes closed. This'll become second nature. So, those little obstacles, throwing up these codes and regulations and sections and everything, I think are just tests. They're tests to see how you're going to respond to their legislative bullcrap that they're going to throw back at you. And that's my opinion. Like David has said many a times, our relief isn't in their forms, at all. Our relief is going internally, into our spirit, and ask for guidance from our divine creator to go ahead and instill in us the understanding and the meaning and what we need to know and do, and walk the walk, and talk the talk, so that we don't have to prove it to anybody. Our actions speak louder than all of our words. Guest, very good point. TJ, Daniel, there's most likely something on that form that is not jibing with the information they have. Guest, I've heard some conflicting things on my state file number, so I've requested another certificate from the state. DC, you put too much information in. Guest, you think I put too much information down? DC, you do not have to fill in every box. TJ, to my knowledge, go ahead, David. DC, the percentage will be minuscule compared to the number of boxes that can be filled in. Guest, I did make an effort to fill in just about everything, like employees, amount of employees, 0, then I put no employees. Stuff like that, but guess it's not. TJ, does the instruction state to place the number of employees on that form? Guest, it does not. TJ, okay, did you put number of employees on there? Guest, I did, but not in prior attempts. I did it as an effort to try something a little different. I remolded the form. Page 32 of 61. TJ, alright, answer me this, Daniel. What's the name's birth month? Don't give me the entire date, I don't want to know, I just want to know the month it was birthed. What month were you born? Guessed, August. TJ, alright, what was put down on the SS4 for the close of accounting year? Guessed, I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Gosh, it wasn't August, it was either the month after or the month before. I know David, in a call, told us how to properly do that, and it says actually in the IRS regulations too what you should put for the closing of the accounting year. TJ, yeah, look up the definition for accounting year, and look at, I think it's probably under GAAP, or something like that, what is used for the close of accounting year if the business was created in the month of August. Guessed, I believe I put July. I mean, I'm not looking at it right now, I'm upstairs. TJ, Now, it appears the IRS will also look at whatever dates put down there. They will verify that. They will actually verify that with the information. Guessed, the filing date. TJ, yeah, exactly. And it appears that if they're not at least close, they're most likely just going to automatically reject it. And see, this is the difficulty because this is pretty much known for a fact. If this is done and someone's shot down, well, I've heard stories that others will go in and they'll fill out like 5 of them, and they'll mail them all in at once, hoping one of them sticks. Well, they can pretty much kiss their chances goodbye that it's ever going to go through, because they'll probably just shred it the minute they receive it. And, see, that's what's unfortunate, and that's what's kind of leery from my perspective about even discussing that type of information because, when it's done correctly, it'll go right through. From my knowledge, there's over a dozen that have placed that in the one time and it went right through. No questions asked, it's gone right through. So, there's something that was maybe done previously that assisted in that going through, or there was something done previously that is not assisting that in going through. The fact still remains though, like Thomas said and David, and so forth, it does not appear to be a requirement. One certainly understands and sees your point of it being you want to see it through. You want to get it done. And the first one of those to ever go through over a half a year. To actually go through from start to finish. So, Thomas, I'd like to say something here if I may. The reporting years for filing, if you're going to open up a business, you've got a requirement to file either 941s or quarterly returns, whichever they meet. Depending on if it's an LLC, LLP, corporation, subchapter S. The year for 2011 is January 12th, April 18th, July 15th, September 17th, and January 12th. So, those dates are, if your birth date was in August and you said that you're going to be filing on a calendar year, then there is a little bit of a lapse. If you're going to file on a fiscal year, like August 31st to September. Page 33 of 61. 1C. Then that might have gone through okay. But, if you've ever filed 1040-S, the requirement is specific that they've got to be done, and sent in, and received by those dates. That's for 2011. 2012 I'm not familiar with. But, I know that the last time that you filed for the 2011 tax year is January 12th of 2012. Then you've got your returns that have to be filed by the 15th of April of 2012. So, depending on if you're filing, see the 1040-S are based upon an estimated tax, whether it's going to be a 941 or 841 or whatever you're going to be filing. And then at the end of that year, that business entity has to file its tax return. So, you may have confused them by starting off a date that didn't coincide closely with your birth date. It's just an observation. I haven't seen your form, and I don't know what you've put on it. But, in my world, all those SS4s that I've seen, that people have done, I always tell them, keep it simple. Don't mark every box on the paper, just keep it simple. If you've got to have an EIN number, get an EIN number. So, DC, X forms and the SS4 are two different subjects, and what you're dealing with on the SS4 is the fiscal year of the business. And it is a business. It ends in the month preceding the month of birth. Guessed, yeah, that's what I had. DC, EINs are not necessary. Not dealing with what we're doing. Host, does that wrap you up there, Walter? Guest. This is Daniel. Actually, this is my father's cell phone. Thank you guys for taking the time out to help me there. Is there anything that you guys wanted to say about the birth certificates and what to do with them? I mean, is this similar to what Rob Ryder's been talking about and researching, with registration of title, and unregistering, and Torrens and whatnot? DC, I have no idea what he's doing. I could care less. Guest, are you familiar with the guy at all? DC, no. Guest, oh, okay. TJ, it is about title, and it's about the receipt, and that certification of vital record is an American depository receipt. The Bank of New York Mellon has a lot of information about ADRs. I believe it's Deutsche Bank that has a pamphlet that's on the internet concerning ADRs, and there's one specific section that states exactly what an ADR is and what it looks like, and it's 3 or 4 sentences. It looks just like a stock certificate. It's evidence of a foreign entity's deposit into a custodial bank domestic, and it fits the certification of vital record perfectly. And really the certification of vital record is, the way one sees it, that falls under page 34 of 61. Section 8 of the Uniform Commercial Code, and it is a certificate or an uncertificated certificate, if that makes any sense. But that's the way it states it out to be, but because it isn't registered per se, it can be called uncertificated certificate, but nonetheless, it does represent assets on deposit being held by a custodian at a bank. It's very eye-opening to read about ADRs. It's very, very interesting. And if you have a moment, look at Bank of New York Mellon's website, and look at the sheer number of ADRs out there. It's just enormous. Thomas, 23.6 trillion. TJ, thank you. Yeah, it's just huge. Thomas, if I was to factor that 10 times, that's 230 trillion. TJ, and those are participant shares, basically, when they're drawn from the county or a state. It's basically a participant share. That's what a dollar bill is. Ultimately, it's a participant share that leads to an asset. A participant share. And that is discussed in Uniform Commercial Code Section 8. Thomas, Article 8. TJ, Article 8, thank you. Article 8. It talks about participant shares and assets. Commercial Code does, in that article, discuss equity. So, equity is called out in the UCC. The UCC does recognize equity concerning the assets, and the assets are bound at the ground level, at the core, of all this paper that's floating around. It goes straight to the heart of the assets. If you ever want to have a little fun, put a, nah, I'm not going to say that. Anyway, let's move on. Guest, okay, I've got a question. I've got a state-issued driver's license that I want to rescind. And those rascals, you know, they want you, if you're going to fill out the paperwork to do it, that you're living in another country. That's about the only way they want to release, or let you suspend or revoke your driver's license, because they really want to hold that to you. Because you blocked up your trust. Is there a way? DC, why do you want to do that? Guest, because I don't want any kind of record of that driver's license, because they'll try to connect that to me. DC, it doesn't matter. It's our responsibility to connect that licensing to the estate as estate property. You take that cotton-picking driver's license number through this registered mail process and serve notice on the Department of Motor Vehicles that that is now estate property, and let their lawyers figure out what to do. Guest, all right. I think that gets to my next question, okay, because here's another thing. I've got a car, and the state claims they own it because I registered it. I want to claim that car back. Page 35 of 61. And if I buy another one, you know, I want to lay claim to it. And this process, what you're saying, bring it into the estate, these rascals don't have a leg to stand on then. DC, everything is notice. Even their copyrights, their land patents, everything is a notice, it is not a claim. They cannot claim anything. Only, I guessed, they'll pretend to be a temporary trustee until a proper claimant steps forward. DC, yes, that's due to our negligence. Guest, yep, and so it's my fault that I haven't stepped forward and laid proper claim to my assets and then pulled them over and put them into the estate. DC, yes, everything is our fault. Chuckle, guest. So, the best way to lay claim to this is like you said earlier, fill it all out, send it through the mail it to yourself. DC, mailing it to, what you're doing is transferring the property to the estate. Guest, yes, and so, the process that you were talking about earlier is the way to do it. DC, the proper procedure of registration and certification. It doesn't get any better than that. Look through any principles of law. When something is registered and certified, it's done and finished. It's a judgment higher than their imaginary United States Supreme Court can. Thomas, you now have a paramount security interest in that property, period. DC, it's private, though. Guest, do I need to say I paid a certain amount for that property to get that secured interest in it? DC, no, you're bonding the transaction with the dollar. With the seal of the United States of America, it's already a done deal. When you put it in the mail, and you go on the website, the USPS website tracking, and track that number, it tells you right on there the transaction has already been accepted. Guest, okay, that would be a little bit like using lawful money, like a silver coin, except you're using, DC, it is a silver coin. That dollar bill is an ounce of silver, on the private. Guest, and so that's why that works right there, because you have a secured interest, because you paid the value of one silver dollar. Page 36 of 61. TJ, yes, you've provided consideration for that, that is correct. Thomas, it's substance. DC, none of their courts can use registered mail. None of them can. They cannot use registered mail for their business transactions. Certified? Yes. Registered? No. Because they can't get insurance for their liability. TJ, which means they can't make a claim in equity. Guest, right, and another thing, I see all these sheriff sales, and so I go there and I like to hand them a silver coin, but they will not accept that. The only thing they will accept is green paper and ink Federal Reserve notes, or a certified bank check. They will not take even tax levies, liens, money that's circulating. DC, they're all werewolves. They can't go near, they can't touch the silver. You're asking. Guest, sheriff's sale, 'cause they have all kinds of nice cars, some way like this to be able to lay a claim to it, that they accept, because they only accept those two forms. It has to go through the bank to them, or they don't accept it. Thomas, okay, yes, there is a way to do it. DC, wait a minute, let me interrupt you. Personally, I'm not going to speak for you other men, I don't want to give people ideas on how to do things. But, there's a process I know of in Texas, and I think it's in Texas and Florida and other states out there, and the territories, it's called adverse possession. Off the top of my head, I would say if there's a bank or a mortgage company or mortgage servicing agency taking possession of a homestead, that you can use this process on that cotton-picking mortgage and court case docket number, and the deed. Probably the deed, and claim it as estate property. I'm not going to tell you to do that. And if you do it and get yourself jammed up and in trouble and go to prison or whatever, that's your responsibility. I'm not gonna take that. I don't want to give you that idea, but there are people that are going to get those ideas. But it seems to me that as long as you're not taking it out from under a family, if they've already lost it, it's already been foreclosed on, sitting there vacant. Go down and get a certified copy of the deed, and it would probably be best if you did a recording first. and do it in executor letter format with the dollar attached as a re-recording of that property, that land. You refer to it as the land, its real estate, deed, property, and things like that. As estate property held on trust special deposit. And re-record that and then publish it in your local newspaper of the county where that property, land's located, 3 times in a month. Once a week, I guess, for 3 weeks. Make proper notice. Then take a record of that publication, and take it back down and re-record all that together. So, you've got the deed, certified copy of the deed, which doesn't have your name on it or the estate's name on it, that's been re-recorded using executor letter format, with the dollar attached, and you can even put the registered mail sticker on that now, that number sticker on there. Leave the registered mail sticker, the red one, leave that off and re-record that, and take a record of that. Go down to the page 37 of 61. Newspaper have it published 3 times. Take a copy of that. They'll give you a copy of the publication. Certify it and put that together, and re-record that again. Now, you serve that on the recorder of deeds, the county clerk that records land deeds for real estate, things like that, where you found the certified copy, and the mortgage company or the bank that that's not estate property. You now have lawful possession. It's better than a land patent. That's my opinion. Guest, we're in agreement. James, next call, okay. DC, get yourself a homestead, folks. Get some with a little bit of land on it with a greenhouse on there and a garden, and get ready. Thomas, yep. Praise Yah. James, is there anybody that has any more questions? James, I just unmated someone from Central Indiana. Guest, actually, I'm supposed to be next. I don't know what happened. I've been waiting in the queue for quite some time. James, okay. Guest, I basically would like to make a statement. James had asked earlier about how one could be more knowledgeable about the topics discussed. And there was some interesting. First of all, what I would like to say is, as wonderful as these remedies are, none of them will work until you believe. And build your will, your beliefs that build upon your will, and you build your will through, or you prove yourself worthy, through study. And as we know when we watch movies out there, for instance, The Matrix, The Wizard of Oz, and recently, The Green Lantern, and there's one common thing that they all have in common, and it's belief. So, in that, and through one's belief, will, I think it comes through study. So what I've done is, when I've started coming to the knowledge that Timothy and David started presenting, they decided to go away with the website and just go into the private. And I was somewhat, little disappointed, but I continued to study. I put in over 100 hours or so of listening to the audio conversations and the literature, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to make some suggestions on some of the recordings that they've done, and some of the literature that they've provided, because I'm telling you, it's all there. Everything that you need, if you will only just study. And what happens is that, we know that your will can be co-opted by fear, and we tend to fear the things that we don't know about. So when we acquire knowledge and we know these things, then there is no fear, then there is our will, then there is our belief, and then we can then manifest what it is we so desire. So, on that, I'm going to get a list here of the audio that I found to be the most helpful, and if you guys would listen to these audios, and listen to them over and over again, they are filled with many gems. And so the things that they are explaining to you now, the concept about the ADR, the American Depositary Receipt, and the Certificate of Birth, and how to go through the process of taking it from one jurisdiction to the other, you'll begin to see that clearly. So, in terms of the audio, it should be TalkShoe with Angela Stark. That was page 38 of 61. One of the most profound interviews that I have ever heard in 6.5 hours. That's the TalkShoe with Angela Stark. That's 6.5 hours. Then there is the audio, which is Office of Man and Trust Currency. And if you guys listen to that, you'll understand all the accounts out there that they are trust currency belonging to the estate. That'll give you an idea about trust currency and why you can go out and claim those accounts, because it was your signature that created those accounts. It's the energy. And it goes on even if you have a bank account, you've closed it on the public side, that energy of that security continues to increase in value, or accrue value. That was Office of Man and Trust Currency. Who owns what? And then there's one of the calls Eustace Mullins was half wrong and Timothy explains why. The other one is silver bullion bonding, and that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with the money and the dollar. And why you're able to use the dollar and the backside of it, because it's really a certificate. And anytime you see a certificate, it's really a claim. So you have a certificate of birth, and you have a certificate of death. And, as we know from what they just told us, that these are American depository receipts, and one might want to go to, in terms of literature, you might want to go to Investopedia, and you want to research American depository receipt, and then on Investopedia they have depository receipt. They tell you exactly what that means. And then you want to look up safekeeping certificate, and I think when you read that, it will, incoherent, blow your mind. And, the next one is how to remove the corrupt official from the office. 1, 2, 3 now I've heard Thomas talk about chancery and go into equity, but once you read that, once you listen to that, you might find it a little less cumbersome when going into court, because the minute you walk in there, and if you know who you are, and you know the power of that office, and you accept that persons who is sitting on that bench, who is an actor, once you accept him and his bond, incoherent, he is supposed to move and protect the estate. Hands down. He knows that. So, it depends on your knowledge and how you assert the executrix or the executor's office. And another one. Host, yes, thank you. Thomas, did you have a question, sir? I was basically saying, because James was saying that, how do we know about this? I was going over all the things that Timothy and David have, in their audio, and if they listen to those, then they don't have to keep asking all these remedial questions, because it's there for them. So, I just have one another thing to say, and that's it. I'm just trying to share with them that everything they need to know is in audio and in literature. And they've had to, incoherent. TJ, very good. Thank you for saying that, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you. James, moving on to Central Indiana. Guest, yes, can you hear me? James, yes, go ahead. DC, no. Page 39 of 61. Guest, yes, I've talked to David 2 weeks ago about my mother's case with the court trying to take over her house, and he showed me how to file a claim. But I recently found out that I need to claim my birth certificate first, before I can claim anything. And do I do my birth certificate? Do I claim it in the state that I'm living, or do I do it in the state that I was born? DC, where did you find that out? Guest, that's what a friend was telling me. DC, I don't know why you'd have to do that. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do, but it's the estate doing the claiming, not you. Guest, okay, the estate. So, I can go ahead and claim my mother's case. DC, yep. Guest, okay. Well, that's all that I needed to know. I'm on my way. DC, yep. I can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Guest, okay, okay. So, I don't have to do my birth certificate, DC. I don't have to be you. I don't have to be your mother. I don't have to be related to you or even know you to go and do it. The law is first in line, is first in time. Guest. Oh, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, sir. TJ, grantor, trustee, beneficiary. Charge, discharge, ground. Just remember that. Your mother is a beneficiary. She needs to be taken care of. The trustee will take care of her once the trustee is put into that position. Guest, okay, thank you very much. TJ, claim the title, claim the title. DC, I'm sorry, repeat that Timothy, I overspoke you. TJ, I'm sorry, I was just going to say as Christian had said, move the title, claim the title, move the title, place it in equity, appoint the trustee, show who the beneficiary is, take care of the matter. It's in the equity, it's in substance. That's where it's at. Thomas, if they come after it after that, that's out and out piracy. That's a total trespass, and now they're subject to all the damages that you as the occupant of the office of the executor want to claim on them for the trespass. So, caveat lector. TJ. What is it called when one attempts to plunder a registered vessel? Page 40 of 61. Thomas, high seas piracy, piracy on the high seas. TJ, piracy on the high seas. The first trial in 200 and something years was conducted, I believe, a year or two ago, and where was it? Quantaquaway, Virginia, at the naval base? DC, at Norfolk. TJ, Norfolk, Virginia, okay. And that was a year or two ago. That was the first piracy case on this land in over 200 years. Attempting to plunder a registered vessel. Registered vessel, registered claim. Registered vessel, registered mail. And it's not even called registered mail, it's just called registered on the green card. It's the same thing. It's now registered. And you know what? It's already registered per se, it just hasn't been claimed. It's the same thing. So, ask someone, are you attempting to plunder a registered vessel? And if that, whomever says yes, they're committing piracy, plunder on the high seas. That is a big no-no. Thomas, that's the case where the Somalis admitted in open court that they're working for Goldman Sachs. TJ, yes, that is exactly correct. Yes. Thomas, and it was incoherent. Goldman Sachs was using it in a derivative in a short put to manipulate more money out of the underwriting that the shippers had to pay because of their passage through that area in Somalia. You know, they haven't changed any of that, right? It's all going to the same place, and they're allowing those people to continue to do that. So, obviously, it's in the benefit of some underwriter, surety, or insurer of the keels of those boats. When I read that the guy provided sworn testimony that he was working for Goldman Sachs, I nearly fell out of my chair, and not any news agency that I know of. I didn't hear anything on the internet, or anything. I just read it on there, but I didn't see any news about anywhere that this guy made that confession. TJ, and anyone out there who has ever bought and sold options definitely knows what news can do to the price of an option. So much money can be made in mere seconds, it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Thomas, well, look what happened today. The NYSE stated that the earthquake had caused a spike in sell-offs because of the uncertainty of how much damage was done. Can you imagine what would happen if incoherent? TJ, exactly. James, a question in the chat window is asking, should we claim the P.O. Box as a state property as well? DC, good idea. I'm sorry I forgot that. Page 41 of 61. Thomas, and I believe that would be done by identifying in the passing lanes on the bond, or the executor letter with the dollar bill, the address, and the zip code, and the post office box number in a specific passing lane that would go below the certified mail lane, or the registered mail lane, because the way I'm looking at these things now, some of these are going to have 3 or 4 lanes, because there's 3 or 4 things that the estate needs to claim as estate property. David, can you imagine if you took the Obamacare bill and claimed it as estate property? Laughter. DC, I wouldn't want to tamper with their public lunacy. Those passing lanes, folks, Put whatever is in between them in that document. Thomas, corroborate. DC, it's a right-of-way. Thomas, I know it's a right-of-way. It's a pass-through. It's a passing right from their so-called dominion into the estate. James, can you make only one claim per letter? DC, yes. Thomas, for example, if you're gonna claim a court case, I believe that court case would have two passing lanes. One passing lane would be for the registered mail number, and the other passing lane would be for the case number. So, if you've got a case in federal district court, or city court, or municipal court, you'd have a passing lane underneath that registered mail passing lane, or certified passing lane, whichever one you're going to use, preferably registered, and you would claim that case number as property of the estate. DC, taking it out of the public and putting it into the private. Thomas, yep. DC, yep. Thomas, and then the other interesting issue of it is, when you flip that wonderful executor letter over and you put over the back of it that notice of declarating intent for special deposit. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. DC, folks, if you're going to be intimidated, do not do this stuff. Do not use this process, these procedures. You're not going to make any friends in your community. You're not going to be popular with the powers that be. Do not use this as a weapon, they will retaliate against you. Page 42 of 61. TJ, they will take you serious. DC, I'm 18 years into this wheelchair, and that's part of the retaliation. It ain't no picnic. James, okay, I don't see any other people with their hands raised, but we've got quite a few questions in the chat window over here. How do we quiet title on the property once we collapse the trust on the property? Do we need to cite equity cases? DC, no. Cite what? James, equity cases. DC, you mean case law? No. Don't put any of that into the executor letter. You don't need to tell them what the law is. You don't need to write an 85-page brief to explain to them what the law is. They know what the law is. You just function in the law, and they will know you're in there. James, on the last call, one of the comments made in the window is, on the last call David and Timothy agreed to discuss the taxpayer letter on this call. Thomas, do you have that recorded somewhere? James, yes, we do. Chuckle. TJ, David, what letter is that? Is that the one about them stating they already have an EIN in place? DC, ouch. Chuckle, TJ, I think I already brought that up. I brought that up a little bit earlier. DC, okay, we let that cat out of the bag. Yes, that's probably the taxpayer letter. We have received as a result of applying for an EIN for the estate, TJ. Someone received it. DC, yes. Trying different ways of doing that, see if it'll work, what the results will be, this and that, and whatever. Received a letter back from the IRS, says Dear Taxpayer. This is a form letter, TJ. I'm sorry, David, I'm sorry. I need to throw this in there. Now, someone mailed, was applying for an estate EIN, and let's say this came across our desk. This one man wanted some input as to what this meant, all right? Now, this is very, very, very interesting. Now, this is going to be thrown in right here. Now, here's the deal. There is an office that is not mentioned in this information. So David, let's see, and Thomas, don't say anything, and James, don't say anything. I want someone else to see if they recognize the office that the IRS. Page 43 of 61. Did not place into this paragraph. And we believe they did that for a very specific reason. So let's see if anyone finds it. I digress. Go. Please proceed, David. DC, keep talking. Let me pull the form up, so so I have it here in front of me. TJ, what's just interesting is they leave off a specific entity. They virtually mention all the other positions, but this one. DC, this is, okay, it's, give me a second here, the system's bringing it up. This is a form letter. In the body of the letter, it has like 5 paragraphs with please use an original copy of the SS form as the fax qualities have poor quality and transmit poorly. Please provide the information indicated by the items checked below. 1 box, 2 boxes, 3 boxes, 4 boxes, 5 boxes, 6 boxes down. And there's 7 of them. This one is other. And this is what it says. It appears an employer identification number has already been assigned. Please provide documentation from the state indicating that you were named executor, administrator, or personal representative along with the Form SS4 so that we may process your request. It appears an employer identification number has already been assigned, chuckle. It states that the birth state already has an EIN for the estate. If they have an EIN, somebody's submitting a tax return every year and signing it for that is state. I'm going back years, about 8-10 years ago they came out with this electronic submission for tax returns, and everybody thought, oh, this is wonderful, they're going to make it easier on the taxpayer. No, chuckle, they didn't do that. Imagine the amount of labor that the state has to expend to have someone sit down and sign a cotton-picking tax return and date it, fold it up, and put it in the mail. Now, these ADRs, even after we pass away, and we don't know for how long afterwards, plus the death certificates, they're trading them on the securities markets. So, the proceeds from all that activity has to be reported to the IRS every month. So, if the state has accounting software that's keeping a record of all the investments, proceeds, and profits, and debts that they have to pay, expenses, and stuff like that, and they can integrate that with a tax filling-in software and just pass it on to another software, and all the tax form is already filled out, and now they have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, tens of millions of these forms that have to be submitted. You've got one employee sitting there at the desk, pushes one key, boom, and everything's submitted and signed electronically. How much labor did they just save? And postage? Thomas gives new meaning to the term robosigner. Page 44 of 61. DC. It appears an employer identification number has already been assigned. We need to find out what that number is. Now, I'll tell you who to go to, and I'll tell you how to do it. Because I'm already doing it. You go to the Chief Deputy Attorney General for the birth state that is the director, or overseer, supervisor, or whatever of their charitable and other trusts and other charitable organizations division or something similar to that. He'll be like a Chief Deputy Attorney General or something like that. I've already dealt with the one here last year, Harrisburg, involving the executor letter, so that's who I'm communicating with. He holds the keys. He's got all these accounts on his monitor, on his computer on his desk. He can access all of them. He can look and see what all the assets are. He knows what all the account numbers are. He knows what the EIN number is. Guarantee it, he can access it. If he can't, then he can direct whatever department, agency, or whatever can provide the information you want to go through him. Because he holds the keys. He is the attorney for all the agencies of the state. And you're not going to get anywhere going around knocking on doors, trying to talk to bureaucrats that don't have any idea that this stuff even exists, or they wouldn't be working there if they did, see, if they knew this stuff. This is a private activity, and you need to conduct it in private through the mail, with an executor letter. And bond the cotton picking thing. And we already gave you the format to use. Write to them, now they're going to get swamped. Good. Chuckle, with a demand. A warranted, let's see, warranted. Thomas, registered warranted bond? DC, yep. Registered warrant bond for disclosure is what you're doing. All of these executor letters that we're telling you to use, you're using the executor letter, the estate at the top, the executor described, but you're going to sign them as general trustee. By general trustee, and the name. James, yeah, it's one of the questions that was asked in the window. TJ. Well, I was kind of wondering that myself. I mean, it could be done, one has done it. Now here's the thing. If one claims the position of trustee, then all the books and records must be opened, so a settlement can occur. But see, here's what's gonna happen. They're not going to do that. At least in my experience, they're not going to do that. And that's why they run from being served. They just won't meet with me, because they didn't want to be served. From the head attorney, all the way down to the finance director, they just hide in their office. Because the page 45 of 61. Trustee has the authority to go in and open the book and see what's there to take care of the beneficiary. But see, they don't want that to occur, they don't want that information out. So if one goes in as the trustee, they're probably going to stonewall it, and they just won't go anywhere. But, if that were me, go in as the executor and order the trustee to settle it for the benefit of the beneficiary and name the beneficiary. Or, provide that number. But see, the only way I see it, they're gonna hand over that information if they're only going to give it to the trustee. And they just won't do that. It's just been David, how long's it been since you sent that request in? DC, months. TJ, months. Yeah. They just won't do it. DC, alright, I'll bow to that. Sign it as general executor. James, and another couple questions, where's the trust, where's the proof? TJ, where's the trust, where's the proof of what? James, the trust. I'm assuming. Thomas, I think what's happening there, if they complied with your request and the accounting wasn't in order, they now have a huge liability over their head. DC, the accounting will be in order. But, this is their piggy bank that they depend on to enslave us. They do not want you to have access to that. Thomas, I think that's the piggy bank that's bankrolling their ongoing business operation that may be part of the CAFR account, or maybe outside the CAFR account. DC, yep, but it's estate property. They cannot claim no ownership over it. Period. They're merely trustees, administrators, administrating the property until the rightful owner, rightful responsible party appears. They cannot claim that title. And, trust. He said, where's the evidence of a trust? Where's the proof, the fact of an alleged trust? DC. Well, that's a question that can't be answered because that information's being held in private. We have no evidence. Neither do the commerce gurus, and I use that term affectionately, that these estates exist. But, the evidence is overwhelming. Let me say this. How long have we been sending them stuff now, Timothy? Going on 2 years now. Never once have we gotten a letter that we were nuts, that this is frivolous, don't write to us again, or we're going to prosecute your but anything like that. They have never said that what we were writing to them about wasn't real. And certainly if it was bogus, they would have told us that out. Page 46 of 61. Of the jump stream. Right out of the chute. I can't provide it to you because the world is hiding it from us. James, he said, he who claims trust must prove trust. TJ, that is correct, that is correct. But the trust can be proven, it's called scripture. DC, there you go. TJ, plain and simple. That's the law form. Scripture. That's the law form that this estate falls. That's the law form. And if someone's gonna come and ask where's the proof of trust to exist, there has to be a law form claim. So the law form claimed by me is scripture. It's right there, that's the will I use. That's being used by me. That law form has been placed into the congressional record, the King James Version, has been placed into the congressional record and it is recognized. There is the proof of the trust right there, plain and simple. James, where in scripture? TJ, where in scripture? The whole, entire compendium. Plus another couple of books that aren't in this specific canon, if you will, because the Council of Nicaea pulled a few of them out. Thomas, 13 to be exact. TJ, yes. That's the evidence of the trust right there. Does that answer whomever was asking that question? Is that enough proof? James, he's saying there are 5 elements of a trust to be recognized as a trust in equity. TJ, okay. DC, that's correct. So, what makes you think you have to come forward with the evidence? They haven't denied. You don't need any evidence until there's a denial. I don't mind you playing the devil's advocate, but you're jumping one block ahead of the process. There's no denial. James, we've had Jenny waiting for a while in the background here with a question. Go ahead, dear. Jenny, hi. I've received a notice from the finance department of my employer, stating that she was holding a court order for garnishment beginning this Friday from a collection agency on behalf of student loan. So, when I asked her for page 47 of 61. DC, I have a hearing coming up involving one of those on the 28th, administrative hearing for a friend of mine in a wheelchair up in Harrisburg. Guest. Okay, so I asked her, I said, well, will you send me a copy of the court order? She said, sure. So when I received the paper, it was not a court order. So, but I didn't receive it till the end of the day, so when I spoke with her today, I said, you know, I played it cool, incoherent, going through the paperwork. Did I miss it? I don't see the court order here. She said, oh no, it's not really a court order, but I'm ordered by the court. I said, so, if you're ordered by the court, where's the paperwork? She said, oh, well see, they don't really go to court for a student loan. They don't do that because it's a waste of time. I have so many student loan garnishments here, they don't even waste their time going to court. Oh. DC, you already gave them permission to garnish you when you signed that contract. It's in the body of the contract. Go read the contract you have signed. Thomas, the student loan contract, you already gave them authority to do that. Guest, oh. DC, that's a good argument though. Thomas. Thomas. I've seen that in an employment agreement with the withholding for one of the agencies here in California, and the guy says, well, he has a court order and everything. I said, oh really? So I said, well, tell the chief financial officer or tell the guys in payroll that you want a copy of it. So, he said okay, so, he got a copy and scanned it in and sent it to me, and I said, God, there's something missing on this. There's no judge's name here, there's nothing. Where's the court order? So, he went back to the guy and said, what do you mean, you're going to take this money out, you're gonna violate my due process rights and all this stuff, and he said, well, you can try that path, but they'll just walk right over it and just take the money out of you, and next time you get a commission check that you've got coming, your only recourse will be to go sue them, which you will never prevail, or send them. Yeah, that's unfortunate. DC. The one I'm involved with is the PHEAA, that's the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. It's a private organization, actually, run by some political appointee. This gentleman went past the period by which he could normally appeal and forestall the garnishment, and he's going through garnishment. But, under the administrative laws of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, he can request an administrative hearing at any time involving this, so that's what we did. The first thing we did was we send them a letter. It's not an executor letter, and this is what it says. This correspondence is to inform that we are not in any way responsible for the referenced debt, nor any fines or penalties attached thereto, for the following reasons. 1. The alleged creditor has not produced the note necessary by which a valid claim can be made. Page 48 of 61. 2. Said claim is not denominated in US dollars, and in fact attaches a Mexican peso symbol to define the currency being described. 3. As well established by the United States Congress in history, the symbol for United States dollars is a $sign. Now, using WordPerfect and inserting a symbol, I was able to select an actual dollar symbol there. 4. The third-party debt collector appears to be acting in violation of the Equal Weights and Measures Clause of the United States Constitution by attempting to collect a debt denominated in foreign currency and failing to convert said foreign currency into United States dollars, creating a false impression of a greater debt, an act also in violation of the full faith and credit clause of said contract, and also in violation of the Equal Weights and Measures responsibility of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We believe that said alleged creditor has been trading said note upon the securities market and profited thereby, and has failed to disclose and remit our share of said profits. Therefore, and for the above reasons, we contest the said alleged debt as false upon its face, and fraud in fact. That initiated contact with this collection agent up there at Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. In fact, he called this man 6 times in 1 week trying to get through to him after he read that, and their lawyers had a chance to look at it. And then he came by and we called him and got him on the phone, and I talked with him. His argument was that none of these claims made any sense to him, and I told him that it wasn't necessary for it to make sense to him. It was necessary for it to make sense to the hearing examiner, so, that has nothing to do with anything. And he said, well, this won't go anywhere, and I told him don't worry about it, just set the hearing date. I'm hawing around, and I finally ask him, are you attempting to obstruct the due process of holding that hearing? Oh, no, he said, I'm not doing that. I said, good, set the hearing date. So, they're going to have one on the 28th, and we're going to deal with that. We're not claiming anything yet. I just want to go toe-to-toe with them, and my friend is game for that, so he's gonna go toe-to-toe with them. I'm not even gonna say what the strategy is over this conference, it's recorded. What I would suggest you do, dear, is use the procedure we described the past 2 recordings and claim that account as estate property and then serve it on the agency that made the student loan. Their treasurer or attorney, incoherent, been served, claimed and registered now as estate property. Guest, you said this is on the previous 2 recordings? DC, yes, here on James Madison's Talk Show. The other one was 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks earlier. Guest, oh my gosh, okay. James, 35567 on TalkShoe, you can go there and get the previous recordings. Guest, okay, I'll do that. Thank you. Page 49 of 61. DC, if you don't have a copy of the executor letter format to use, send me an email, countinotary@gmail.com, countinotary@gmail.com, and I'll respond back and say hi, and there's links under my signature where you can go to find those. Guest, okay, I will, thank you so much. Thomas, good luck to you. Guest, thank you. TJ, I want to throw something into the previous question, and David made the comment that it's private. And in Black's Law, look up the word in the 8th edition, look up the word trust. And on page 1265, upper right-hand corner of the right column, it reads private trust. A private trust is a trust created for the financial benefit of one or more designated beneficiaries, rather than for the public benefit. An ordinary trust as opposed to a charitable trust. 3 elements must be present for a private trust, not 5. 3. The first is the demonstrated intent of the settlor. 2. Trust property as res. And 3. A certain beneficiary capable of enforcing the trust. A certain beneficiary capable of enforcing the trust, that is equity, all the way. Thomas, pure and simple. TJ, pure and simple. It's equity. A certain beneficiary. A certain named beneficiary, basically. Capable of enforcing the trust, so it's not the settlor, or the grantor enforcing the trust. It's not the trustee enforcing the trust. It's the beneficiary, enforcing the trust. There's the intent of the settlor, trust property is res, and a beneficiary capable of enforcing the trust. So, the honoros falls on the beneficiary, who is there to enforce the trust, plain and simple. Now that's the private trust, not the public trust or the charitable trust, which all these seem to be out in the world. Now the comment made was, what proof is there to prove that there is a trust? So, that question should be asked to whomever posed that question. You tell me. It's not for me to answer for you, it's for you to answer for yourself. Are you a beneficiary capable of enforcing that trust? It's up to you. It's not up to me. Thomas eloquently points this out, David eloquently. This trust as a beneficiary? And that will be proven out, as each one of us goes on our walk. But it's always the beneficiary in a private trust, and this is also known as a private trust estate. The beneficiary has to enforce it. So can the beneficiary enforce it? Thomas, absolutely. TJ? Yeah. Now, Christian has talked about, invoke your law form. What law form? Some invoke a law form going to 1776, others might invoke another law form and this, that, and another, and that's their status as a beneficiary, and so be it, cool, The law form that one chooses is scripture, that's the law form. Plain and simple. That's faith. In college, at college, whatever, there was a professor, a communications professor. I got into a bit of a debate with him. And he was basically egging me on to prove something that he said could not basically be. So he's like, well, prove it to me, and I said, okay, I'll prove it to you. I said, you have a daughter, correct? He said, yes. I said, do you? Page 50 of 61. Love your daughter. He said, yes. I said, prove it to me. And he sat there, he looked at me, oh well, that's blah blah blah. I said, no, prove to me that you love your daughter. I said, prove it to me right now. Well, I read her a story before she goes to bed. I make sure her hair's brushed. I make sure she gets to school. I said, so what? That doesn't prove to me that you love her. So what? You see the point I'm making? It's not up to me, it's up to him. He can't, whatever he does cannot prove it to me. Thomas, it's an intangible item. You can't put your finger on it. It's like, you can't put your finger on love. You can't put your finger on proving love. It's all based upon an action. See, you confounded the crap out of him. TJ. Yeah, I did. And here's this PhD professor who's trying to show his student, something or other, but it will slip right back on him. Now, in the way I look at it, and the will that I apply to my life as best I can every day, states that there's no greater love than for you to give your life for another. So, if I see someone giving up their life for another one, guess what I just saw? I just saw love, right there. Now, if that man would have come back to me and said, you know what, Scripture says, that if I give my life up for my daughter, that's love. And if he would have said that to me, you know what I would have said to him? Yes, very good, now I see. You see what I'm saying? Because that's how I approach it. But, he could have brought up any other thing. I said, nope, that doesn't prove anything to me. That just proves to me that you don't want her to get cavities. That's why you tell her to brush her teeth. It's not something for me to prove to anyone else. It's internal to each and every one of us to find. That, plain and simple, and then enforce it. And that, to me, is the textbook definition of faith, plain and simple. Guest, I'd like to make a comment on that. TJ, please. Guest. Yeah, this is Tony Evans, from Charlotte. Many times when you look at the so-called proof that a judge may ask, the entire exercise of the estate claiming and doing your registered warrant claim, what we're doing, we're correcting the record because up until that time we never claimed it. So therefore, everything has been construed into a trust that is not to our advantage. We've been basically punished, and penalized, and fined, and everything else because we don't